everybody, welcome to the Chess Harbor. My name is Raf, and today I want to review another one of my Road to Master games from the Club Championship. I was playing round 5 against last year's winner, so a very experienced opponent. To put it in terms, my opponent had about a little over 1,000 games played in his lifetime. Compare that to my about 50 games. It does put a big difference in the playing experience. The elos are about equal, so I definitely know that I'm not a worse player. I've also managed to beat him earlier this year in a Blitz championship, so I definitely know that I do have winning chances here, and that's exactly what I was trying to play for. So my opponent plays the move d4, and I wanted to play a aggressive dynamic approach, so I played the move c5. It's one of my favorite openings to play against d4. It immediately questions the pawn on d4 and asks white, what are you going to do? White has 3 options. They can capture your pawn, they can push the pawn, or they can defend the pawn in numerous ways with e3, c3, knight to f3, and all of them lead to entirely different structures. I want to quickly mention that pretty much the only good move for white here to keep some kind of advantage is the move d5, after which black is kind of spoiled for choice in what they can play. It's usually why a lot of players with white avoid the move d5, is because there is a lot of theory here. You can play a move like knight to f6, and after c4 you can play b5, the Benko Gambit. You can play e6, the modern Benoni. You can play e5, the Czech Benoni. You can play some quieter setup with g6, and then later choose if you want to play b5 or e6. So there is a lot of different options here for black, and that's usually why a lot of players avoid the move d5. We're not going to go very deep into this theory, as it is not an opening video, but d5 is definitely the most critical option for black. You need to learn what to do against it, because it's white's best option, but there is so much theory that a lot of white players avoid it. And that's the reason why I like playing the move c5, as because the other 2 moves simply just lead to equality. The move d takes on c5, even though you're down a pawn, you're gonna immediately win it back with the move e6. There's no way to defend the pawn. If you play b4, you go a5, and you just can't defend this pawn, as this leads to a classic trap where you lose the rook. Playing the other way around with a6 leads to you losing material this way. So there is no way to hold on to the pawn. The only try you can do is bishop to e3, and after knight to a6 there is no way to defend the pawn an extra time, and you're going to lose it. So it's kind of like the Queen's Gambit in the reverse colors with black. It's impossible to hold on to this pawn, so it's better for white to just let it go. If you really do want to capture it, it's better to just play for development. Let white capture your pawn and just keep on developing. It's about equal at this position. Black's gonna get more space in the center, and usually these positions are gonna end up in black playing with an isolated queen's pawn, which you can take or you can leave. It's personal preference, of course. I really like playing the side of the isolated queen's pawn as well, as you're going to get a very dynamic, aggressive position. But there's definitely a point to be made that in an endgame you're going to be worse. So my opponent didn't do any of these things. My opponent just defended his pawn with the move e3. It's a very passive move. Of course, I don't want to take now, because if we trade these pawns, now his bishop opens up. He still has more space in the center, so it would kind of be like just playing a Carlsbad pawn structure with my pawns on these squares. My opponent has pawns on these squares, and the position is relatively equal as well, but I don't want to do that, as if I don't trade, I'm going to be slightly better, because his dark square bishop is going to be weak. So in this position, I played knight to f6. I just want to keep the tension here. My opponent can still play the move d5, and we're going to transpose to similar kind of structures like you have in other Benonis, except that the pawn on e3 is kind of misplaced. My opponent just kept on developing, knight to f3, and I played g6. I need to develop my bishop somewhere. It's going to be best on the long diagonal, just putting more pressure on this center. If my opponent takes the pawn, this bishop is going to be a monster. I want to mention that if he does take the pawn, it's very easy to get it back. Just queen to c7 is going to get it back. Queen to c7, b4. Yeah, this bishop, you can already see that it's going to be an absolute sniper. It's not advised to play this kind of way as white, as it's very easy to undermine the queen side with a move like a5. The bishop is going to be a monster on the diagonal. The queen is good on the c7 square. It's always good to play the knight here, knight there, and you can very easily put pressure on all of these points. So it's ill-advised to capture this pawn at this point. So my opponent didn't do that as well. He played move bishop to e2, bishop g7, castles, castles. And now we have a very slow middle game kind of structure where my opponent has a very passive but solid setup with bishop e2, knight f3, and just the central pawns. So he's not really ready to develop the queen side yet. So that's especially not why I don't want to give him this pawn trade. But now he does play the move c4. So he's ready to either push on or open up the position himself and then develop the queenside pieces. And this is a moment where you can do a lot of things as black. You can still wait with a move like e6, and that allows white to transpose to a kind of Benoni structure. You can just wait, but I really like just blowing up the position here with the move d5. It stops the move d5 from white. And we're saying if we can trade off all of these pawns, then our bishop opens up, our queen gets some space, our knight gets space, this bishop gets space, and we are going to enjoy a nice position where probably everything is equal. The engine also calls this all zeros, but black has the more open position where you have more piece mobility. So if somebody is going to play for a win here, I think it should be black. My opponent plays the move knight to c3 here. I just want to show you that, for example, if we keep going for some kind of equality, so let's say we capture all of these pawns, then here, even after this takes, after a move like knight to e4, black is actually the one who's better here. You can just capture back this pawn immediately. There is a lot of pressure here. And after a move like knight to c3, knight just takes e5, you're equal on material, but again, black's development is pretty simple. The bishop comes out, the knight comes out, and the position flows itself. It's probably equal, but I personally like position of black more because your bishop on g7 is just much better than the opposite, the bishop of the white. So here, my opponent didn't do any of this. He just played move knight c3, which is a good move. Just puts pressure, keeps the tension. Definitely nothing wrong with this one. But now I decided that it's a good time for me to break up the position. C takes on d4, E takes on d4, and D takes on c4. The reason why I did this is because now I give white an isolated pawn. And as we mentioned earlier, the isolated pawn often gives some kind of attacking chances, but in a position where I'm definitely not behind on development, the position is not really going to be any kind of attacking game for white, and they're going to have passive defense on this isolated pawn throughout the game. So my opponent does play a good move. He plays knight to e5. He wants to capture back with the knight here, but I immediately challenge it with knight to c6. So I want to just chop off the knight, or actually just pressure the d4 pawn if I can. So if he just takes here, for example, then I'm very happy to just trade off all of these pawns, and now I have a good strong knight, and I'm just up a pawn. So my opponent, he trades the knight, b takes on c6. Now I have these doubled pawns, which he can immediately take one of them, so material is level again. This pawn does a nice job of controlling the square in front of the pawn, and even though the c-file is technically half open for white and they could pressure my pawn, there is currently a lot of jamming on here, so it's a real traffic jam. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. And I have a nice half open b-file to pressure. I have the idea of playing e5 at some point. I can occupy the d5 square. I have a lot of activity here, so I like this position for black. I played queen to c7 here. This move was a very simple idea. I want to play rook to d8, pressure on the d-file, and maybe at some point threaten some kind of cheapos with knight to g4, threatening mate. The knight can do some other things, can come to d5, for example, and we're just going to put pressure on the d4 pawn here. Another idea I had was queen to b6, with the idea of playing bishop to a6, to just trade off the light square bishop as it's white's best piece. it's going to be my worst piece. Then I can put a pawn on e6, have really solid control over this d5 square, and then just plonk a knight on there and play for an advantage against the double or against the isolated pawn. That was definitely also a good idea here, but I was a little bit worried about knight to a4 here, which didn't look super appealing. So queen to c7. And now my opponent played h3, maybe because he foresaw me putting a piece on g4 here, that he wanted to stop it, just giving his king some kind of luft in an endgame. It's a principled move, but it's again a little slow, so I tried to take advantage of it with move rook to d8, just putting more pressure here. And now my opponent actually went for a counter punch. He went for queen to b3, going after my c7, my f7 pawn. And actually this doesn't work because I have a very nice move, rook to b8. Sadly, I looked at this move, but I didn't saw the correct continuation, and I decided not to play it. But let me show you that white's best option is to move the queen again and not take here, because after taking here, this would be clearly better for white now, as you just snatch the pawn. But it's king to f8. You're keeping contact with the bishop, so the queen has to keep in contact with the bishop or you lose it. So for example, queen to c4 and then rook to b6 is the idea, with bishop to a6 coming, and you're going to pick up an exchange for the pawn. So that's a very nice idea here. Now after, for example, a4, bishop a6, you have to play a5, and then we're going to trade a lot of material for the queen here, but White has a lot of material for his queen, but the engine still prefers black. I would still prefer black as well. You're playing up material technically, but the queen is just also so much easier to use than all of these smaller pieces. So that's definitely a very interesting continuation, but I didn't see the correct move. So after my opponent played queen to b3, I passively played e6 to block off this diagonal, but it also blocks in my bishop, which that's the main reason why rook to b8 is just the better move here. So after e6, my opponent played the move e3. He wants to cover the square of his d4 pawn. Now played knight to d5. So maybe looking to trade off the bishop here, so I have the bishop pair, but in general just blockading the square was good enough. My opponent took, and I take back with the c pawn. Taking back with the e pawn here was also possible. Now we have the idea of occupying the e-file and going for some kind of attack maybe. The bishop has a good home on f5, but I felt leaving the pawn on the c-file here was a little bit risky, so taking with the c-pawn, very solid. I already have some control over the c-file, and I can maybe put a rook on there and increase it, so that felt very, very simple. He has to move the bishop again, so bishop to d3, now queen to b6. I want to trade off the queens here. My opponent accepted this. He could have chosen not to, but it doesn't really make a difference. The queen has a nice home on b6 with very strong pressure on the e5 pawn. That's the reason why, of course, he traded it. But after a takes on b6, this pawn controls the c5 square, which is nice for me, as it could potentially become an outpost for a rook maybe. And it also allows me to put some pressure on the a-file. So now my opponent closed the a-file with a3. It might have been a better idea for him to play the rook to c1 immediately. My idea is to put the bishop on a6 and trade it off, but now at least he could threaten some kind of invasion and not fall passively to the defense of the a pawn currently. But my opponent, he doesn't do this, so he plays the move a3. And now I play bishop to a6. So I want to neutralize this bishop. He has no other option than to take the bishop, or he could play rook to d1 maybe, but after takes, yeah, I can claim the c-file first, and I think definitely easier for black to play here. Position is equal, but black has more activity still. Now we can just double up with move like c4, rook to c4, and rook 8 to c8, so I definitely feel like black has a better position here. So my opponent, he just trades the bishop, I take back with the rook, and now rook ac8, or ac1 rather. And I play rook to a4. Very nice move. I thought this was an excellent idea here to put lateral pressure on the d4 pawn. So my opponent is forced to defend it with rook to d1. And now I thought a long time about playing rook to c4 here. And the engine calls this equal as well, so he definitely thinks it's a good idea if rook takes, pawn takes on c4, and this pawn is still very weak. We're opening up 2 pieces against it, so white has to sit back and defend. And now I thought bringing the king to d5 here, if I can step up and bring the king all the way to d5, then I think I should be okay. Because I have nice pressure with my pawns potentially becoming a passed pawn. And I can also just sit back and blockade this pawn for the rest of the game. But in the end, I thought it looked a little bit weak because maybe he can get his queenside pawns moving, and then at some point maybe he gets a passed a pawn or something and I have a problem. So I eventually decided to go for a different plan, which is move b5. And I'm looking to play b4 here and to just undermine these pawns. So the idea of the minority attack, it actually just works like a charm here as well. So my opponent came up with quite a creative defense. He plays rook to c3, b4, so I want to trade off the pawn, and now rook to b3. So he's just saying, go ahead and take, otherwise I'm going to take your pawn. So I have to do something about it, of course. So a takes on b3, rook takes on on a3, and now rook to b4. So just keeping the pressure on the b4 pawn. He plays pawn to b3, and now I played rook to f, or bishop to f8 rather. The reason why I played this is a little bit of a cheap trick. So if, for example, let's just say white passes the turn with king to h1, for example, now I have rook takes on d3 with an attack on his rook. That was my idea, just threatening, kind of cheapo here. My opponent didn't fall for it. He played rook da1, just defending his rook. So now, of course, if I would take his rook, then he just takes my position apart, and here I'd just be down a piece, so that doesn't work anymore. So rook ad1, and now I played king to g7. I want to slowly improve the position. There's no real reason that my bishop should be on this post, because if I keep my bishop on the long diagonal, yeah, he could just always just go back with the rook, and there is nothing that's going to happen. That felt like a bit of a draw, a bit of boring chess. Then he could just bring his king slowly to defend, maybe to d3, so probably the king, excuse me, that's a mistake. Where did I put it? Where are we? Bishop to f8, and then king to g7. So he probably brings his king over to d3, and then his position is going to be very safe, and my king is still a long way off to do something useful here, so that definitely doesn't feel correct. So instead he just plays rook to b1. Now I play rook d to b8, and we actually agreed on a draw here, as the position feels very dull, feels that nobody's going to make any progress. The engine agrees here. The engine gives a very slight edge to black. It says 0.5 in advantage here, but I think a draw is a fine result here. The bishop is probably going to come to a move like d7, going to come to e7, d7 here, and my idea was that I could slowly improve the position with h6, g5, king 8, g6, and then maybe like f6, e5, but all of this is very slow. In the meantime, white kings is gonna come around, and even if he loses this b3 pawn, with the activity that his rook could get along the 7th rank, together with his bishop just holding the pawns on light squares, this position should be a draw here. So we agreed on a draw. I think it's a fair result. We're about equal in strength, and he was last year's winner of the club championship. So I felt like playing with black, a draw is definitely a good result here. Of course, playing the move c5 is not something you play for a draw per se, but the result is good. So I hope I can pick up the pace and score a win in the next round again. Currently I'm in 3rd spot, as I haven't lost a game yet, but I did score a couple of draws, so I'm hoping I can pick up the pace next time. So I hope to see you for the next review. Thanks for watching.